You ever noticed how many games these days have battle passes? We've got Fortnite, Destiny, Overwatch, Call of Duty, Halo, PUBG, Helldivers, Battlefield, and those are just shooters. There are so many games that have these extra pieces of monetization baked within them, along with the drip-fed content that the passes actually monetize. This ranges from new game modes, activities, weapons, and more on one side of the spectrum, all the way to just a few new cosmetic options on the other. Battle passes are some of the most visible examples of how live service design has spread out massively amongst the game industry over the past decade. Live service games. You hear the term a lot, but it ends up being a catch-all phrase for "I don't like this game's monetization" half the time. I'm gonna go with my own definition of live service, just so we all understand what I'm talking about for the rest of this video. Live service games are games that have consistent content updates, are meant to be played regularly over the course of weeks, months, or longer, and attempt to create a living, breathing world. Live service games are generally seen as the devil of the modern games industry. They exemplify all that's wrong with gaming, over-monetization, a lack of content, excessive FOMO, and more. But I want to start this discussion off on a clean slate. Look, live service isn't a genre of games. Instead, it's a monetization model. They aren't inherently bad or good, but making a good live service game is immensely challenging on developers, and those issues are passed on to the players. I think I'm in a unique position to discuss the pros as well as the numerous pitfalls that live service games can and do fall into. My favorite game of all time, as well as my most played, is Destiny 2. I've got I've got a lot of hours, alright? I started playing in October of 2019 during the Shadowkeep expansion, and I've loved it ever since. But even my favorite game of all time is one of the worst offenders of the myriad of issues plaguing modern live service games. I want to have a productive discussion about why live service games have the potential to be groundbreakingly incredible experiences, as well as why making those dreams a reality is nearly impossible. So let's start talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly of live service games. Live service games can be really goddamn cool in the right circumstances. The promise of a living, breathing world is super attractive, and when it's pulled off, yeah, it's awesome. Fortnite is one of the best examples of this living, breathing world that I've ever seen in a game. In its Season 10, a countdown was seen above one of the game's locations, Dusty Depot. Players had no clue what it even meant, but it persisted through every game of Battle Royale. When the date finally came, everyone playing the game at the time saw the same event occur live. They saw a rocket pierce the sky before more rockets came flying down into the world. A massive meteor hit the map as players were flung back before sucking the world into nothingness. This event literally shut down the game. The entire population of a massive game, the biggest hint since Minecraft, just couldn't play. Then afterwards, a brand new map dropped. The first time in Fortnite's history that the game didn't just add new areas, instead adding a wholly new island to explore. This event is absolutely genius. It's so unexpected, and it's only something you could do in a live service game. When I talk about a living, breathing world, this is what I mean. Everyone getting their expectations completely shattered at the same time is an incredible feeling. It was so exciting watching everyone theorize what had come next, watching people realize that Epic Games clearly was doing something special. The wait paid off too, both financially for Epic Games and for the player base. A new island was something no player even seriously conceived. It was just way beyond what had been done before. Fortnite chased a new degree of scope and scale with its live event and subsequent content drop. It also built an incredible amount of hype for the game, even outside of its traditional player forums and Reddit pages. Everyone was talking about what Fortnite did. Player counts spiked, and the community came together. Look, it sounds stupid, cliche even, but one of the best parts of live service games is how connected players feel to the community. When you've been through each and every experience the game has released up to this point, when you know the stakes of the story or the meaning of a massive gameplay change, it creates a powerful connection to the player. When I watched the Destiny 2 Final Shape trailer that showed off a new ability that let players mix and match different elemental subclasses together, I was shocked. The entire community was. This palpable excitement crept in, and it felt awesome being part of a community where each and every player was absolutely blown away. There's something beautiful about when even the worst times in the game create fond memories looking back, how you and your fellow players toughed it out and now get to experience the game in a far better state. I've made some incredible friends from the Destiny community, and that's just one live service game. World of Warcraft players, Overwatch fans, the Helldivers community, they're also welcoming and kind on the whole. Yeah, there are some bad apples, but these communities are beloved because of how they come together and create real friendships. Live service games exist for a while when they do well. World of Warcraft has been running for nearly 20 years. Destiny 1 came out in 2014, and its story was directly followed up by Destiny 2 in 2017, which is still running strong today. Players build connections to these games. I started playing Destiny 4 years ago. It means a lot to me. It's been with me through major parts of my life, through relationships and jobs and school and so much more. You become attached to it. It sounds weird, but it's really special. The game means so much to me because I've spent so much of my life with it. Its most recent expansion, The Final Shape, ended the 10-year story the game had been telling since 2014. Look, that story sucked at the beginning, but by the end, it became something really special. The Final Shapes campaign ended on a cliffhanger with an in-game timer counting down for all players, showing when the big bad would try to end the universe. A big activity called a raid was released, and it took nearly 19 hours for the first team of 6 players to beat it. Its completion launched the final mission, an incredibly emotional payoff to a decade's worth of storytelling. It made me cry multiple times. Games can make you feel things when they really connect with you. I'll never experience another moment in gaming quite like that, where the last 4 years of my life culminated into an emotional payoff worth every second. Games that make you feel are special. Live service offers more opportunities for connections to form and creates a uniquely close and intimate connection with the player. These games' communities provide feedback. They argue and fight amongst themselves about minute updates and changes because they truly care and love their games. Halo Infinite was touted to last a decade and be the reason to buy an Xbox Series X or S. It came out on Xbox One, but regardless, the game had a rocky road to release, including the infamous Craig moment from its E3 trailer. When it finally came out after a delay, the game's multiplayer had issues. The game released with just 10 maps across all of its modes, including just 3 maps for the popular Big Team Battle mode. It had balance issues, awful monetization, and lacked critical features for a Halo game at release, most notably the complete absence of Forge mode. Forge allows players to build their own maps and game modes, and kept previous Halo games alive with constant new and exciting maps to play when the developers were working on new content for those games or new games entirely. Halo Infinite's launch, put bluntly, sucked. A lot. And the developers fixed it. Look, Halo Infinite still has issues, but the game is an entirely different beast now versus launch. There are tons of maps, incredibly in-depth Forge features, new weapons and abilities, and that's all built on top of the one aspect of the game that was already stellar, its gunplay. Halo Infinite would have stagnated as a traditional release. It would have lacked nearly all of its multiplayer content that it now has, and it would have been a far lesser game. Instead, player feedback drove the developers to create a game that players love, despite its shortcomings. Another one of live service's major advantages over traditional games has to be its potential for value for the consumer. It's rare that it happens in practice, but we'll get to that later. Most of the biggest live service games are free, from Destiny to Fortnite to Overwatch and beyond. At its best, free-to-play titles give incredible experiences to tens of millions of players for no cost, all supported by cosmetic microtransactions. I'd honestly argue Fortnite's monetization, while worse in recent years, is the gold standard of the industry. You can earn plenty of in-game currency from just playing the game, and aside from the rhythm game mode, no content is locked behind microtransactions. The game has an insane amount of content, from custom-made stuff from the community to an incredibly fleshed out and ambitious battle royale that I still really enjoy playing. It's a free game that you can play with your friends and have a blast in, and it's one that constantly updates due to a portion of the player base wanting cosmetics. You can even pretty easily get enough V-Bucks to buy the battle pass if you just play for free for a couple of seasons, and at that point the passes have more than their cost of V-Bucks within them, not to mention the skins and emotes throughout. The issue is that this is all at its best, and that's rarely the case in most games. Again, we'll get back to this point later. Live service games have real, tangible benefits when compared to traditional releases. They can create obscenely dedicated communities with members that have real attachments to both the game and each other in a positive way. They can create events that bring people together and create an awesome sense of togetherness. Destiny 2 has had massive puzzles that have taken the community days to solve, and those are some of my favorite memories in gaming. They can feel like real worlds that change and morph over time in insanely cool ways. They can be updated to fix issues over time and can easily address player feedback, and they can even be a great value for the consumer when they're free to play. You can get a AAA experience that is wholly supported by cosmetic purchases, allowing millions to experience it for free. Man, these games sure seem incredible. We should make every game live service, right? No, there's a lot of issues with live service. Yeah, so let's be real here. Live service games have massive problems. Making a game that you want to exist for years and years is incredibly difficult for so many reasons. Live service has been around for a while now. Look, RuneScape launched in January of 2001. There have been live service games for over 20 years, and right now companies are really trying to make everything live service. They see how well Destiny and World of Warcraft and Fortnite have done, so they decide to take their co-op, story-focused sequel to a beloved franchise and add live service elements to it. Oh, this'll be great! Yeah, so that absolutely sucked. The Batman Arkham series has always been a single-player, action stealth romp, and it's done a great job at it. Warner Brothers saw that live service games do well and tried making Suicide Squad into one, clearly lacking even a cursory understanding of why those live service games did so well. Live service does not work for everything. Some games and genres are nearly incompatible with it, and even for those that work with live service, you kinda need to design the entire game around it. Shoehorning random grinding and looter elements into your co-op action adventure game because the successful live service games do it is asinine. It's like if you saw that McDonald's was doing great with a drive-thru, so your local fire department adds one too. No, that's not how that works. That helps no one. Suicide Squad also had one of the most common issues live service games face clear as day at launch. There wasn't much to do. Halo Infinite had barely any maps at launch. Battlefield 2042 had just 7. Hell, Battlefield didn't have any single-player offering to speak of, and yet it was still $70 at launch. The game lacked content, it had little to do, and worst of all, what was there wasn't compelling. The issue with live service games is that the developers end up needing to make both a fully featured and fleshed out game for launch day, as well as making content months to even a full year ahead of time in order to sustain consistent updates. Those updates need to be substantial with enough content to hold existing fans over and re-engage lost players. That's far, far easier said than done. Developers end up needing to make not only a full game, but also another couple of massive pieces of content for launch. They need to have complex roadmaps ready that detail how the game will evolve and change over time. Often this leads to developers cutting out content from the game and repackaging it as DLC, free or otherwise. Look, this makes sense from a dev's perspective. You know you have to keep players engaged to keep them playing, and as games get more expensive to make, having one project require 50% more dev time and content than a typical one is just a bad bet financially. So why not cut out some features and content that'd be ready for launch and push them back a few months? What could possibly go wrong? And boom, a game releases with nothing to do, feeling lifeless and soulless. Speaking of developers, live service games are absolutely brutal on them. Developers are like you and me, they're just regular people. They're told by higher-ups who are told by higher-ups who are told by higher-ups that they need to make more money, and what monetization model is doing better than live service now, right? So they begin to make a live service game, and even if it has a successful launch and does well, those same developers now have to make so much content so quickly that they have no time to look back on what they're doing. There isn't time for review or for polish. Content has to be out by a certain day, so it's releasing regardless of quality. I commend developers. The modern games industry is plagued by crunch and toxic work environments, and yet they push to deliver some of the best experiences possible. Live service games nearly always push developers harder than any other kind of release because momentum is so important for live service content. Developers need to be able to react to feedback as soon as possible, address pain points and random community frustrations that come out when a game is in the hands of millions of players rather than a few hundred dev testers. There's a conference held annually called GDC, or the Game Developers Conference. It's full of developers from hundreds of companies all coming together to discuss the inner workings of game development as well as show off their work. Bungie's Justin Truman, general manager of Destiny 2, gave a presentation that rapidly made waves outside of just the developer scene. He describes something insane: over-delivery as well as its consequences. For some context, Destiny 2 was in a rough spot after its initial release. The game was doing bad for a whole host of reasons, and it took the game being on its last legs for the game's first major expansion, Forsaken, to save it. It was developed with the help of 2 extra studios and was, and arguably still is, the greatest expansion ever released in Destiny's history. It had an insane amount of content, secrets galore, new activities, new missions, new locations, and more. It was a landmark achievement for Bungie. And now every player compares every expansion to it. Few have ever come close to matching it. Watch Justin describe the issue with over-delivery.
Over-delivery is actually dangerous for a train station. With every release that you put out there, you're setting a pattern for your community and for your players. And so if we release an expansion with 2 raids, let's say, next year, our community is going to be upset if we go back to only 1 raid.
I hate that clip. Nothing against Justin. He seems like a kind and intelligent guy who lives in the reality of the situation live service games find themselves in. But that is goddamn demoralizing to hear as a player. He isn't wrong by making incredible content when you have the opportunity, when teams finish their jobs faster than expected and have extra time and spend that time creating cool stuff. Players will then expect that same level of quality and quantity every year. It happened with Forsaken. It happens in every live service game. People always compare what they got with what came before. It's human nature. When stuff isn't up to that same quality standard as what came before, it angers people. From a developer's perspective, being weary about over-delivery makes some sense, and that sucks for everyone. Players get less incredible stuff to interact with and engage with. Developers have to sit there watching a game stagnate, because if they go above and beyond what they'll be able to consistently do, then player sentiment may actually get worse. But this is proven flawed logic. By not exciting, by not over-delivering, player sentiment gets worse. Games get stale when players know exactly what to expect. Look, think of some of your favorite moments in gaming. I'd bet a lot of money that most of those moments involve something shocking happening, something that really sticks with you because it was above and beyond the typical experience we have in a game. That's what games are about. They're about the exceptional, the moments you remember long after you put down the controller or step away from the keyboard. Live service can put developers and players in an impossible situation. If devs push and over-deliver, players will get mad when that same quality standard isn't always attained. If devs stay the course and keep making roughly the same quality stuff for years, everything begins to stagnate. It all feels samey, like nothing ever changes. Justin has a great quote from this presentation, one that rings incredibly true.
Anger is not the opposite of loving a game. Anger is like 2 degrees off from loving a game, and they both come from passion, from people who are highly engaged with what you're making. And the opposite of loving a game, the thing that could kill you, is apathy. And that's so much more scary than anger.
But by creating the same stuff, the same quality, the same shtick, it all melds into one thing. It becomes unexciting, it becomes boring. The game doesn't engage anymore. Players become apathetic. This constant struggle between over-delivery and consistency is an issue live service games will never stop fighting. There is a healthy balance, introducing some incredible new surprises while still making sure that you can deliver quality each and every release, but that balance is awfully hard to find, especially for newcomers. Newcomers in live service have a massive hurdle to climb, one that's nearly insurmountable: oversaturation and cost. There are so many live service games releasing, but there's a limited audience for each. There's only so many people who get excited at the prospect of a multiplayer looter shooter. There's only so many people who can't wait to play the next big fantasy MMORPG. There's only so many people who want to play the next Arkham game that's co-op and grindy as all hell. Clearly, not that many people fit the bill there. Look, these games have limited appeal because only so many people want to dedicate hundreds of hours to just one game, and I mean, who can blame them? There's so many established live service games constantly vying for players' attention that you need to make something truly spectacular to stand out, at least one element that really shines. Destiny 2 has the greatest gunplay out of any game in my opinion. Overwatch may be the most polished shooter ever made. Helldivers' humor and co-op chaos are unmatched in the modern AAA game ecosystem. These games are, in one way or another, spectacular in their own right, regardless of being live service, and that's insanely hard. Making a shooter unique is like trying to make the most unique platformer. Like, sure, you can do it, but so many people have made these games for years, it's nearly impossible to stand out. Making a successful live service game makes developers need to put in more time and energy and effort than nearly any other kind of game because they need to make this supposedly living, breathing world also be a spectacular game in its own right. It's an insane amount of work. These games require so much time and energy for players to stay engaged, needing hours a week in order to stay on top of things, that players can only really dedicate time to 1, maybe 2 live service games. We have a limited amount of free time. We can't spend it all trying out different MMOs. New live service titles don't just compete with existing live service offerings for players, they also compete with regular games. Stuff like Elden Ring and Tears of the Kingdom are always going to have an insane amount of players when they release, and losing players for a week can mean losing them for life in this type of game. Live services are notorious for being awful to get back into after their launch windows. Everything tends to just add up in these games, expansions worth of content that no one plays anymore sitting at the wayside. There can be 10 different campaigns that a new player can experience, with only one actually mattering to the endgame story at this point. New player onboarding is awful. Destiny 2's new player experience is so bad, I plan on eventually making a separate video covering it. Thing is, new players are the lifeblood of these games, as they can't inherently retain every existing player. Some will leave over time, and eventually the game stops being profitable to run. These games are so expensive for a combination of everything mentioned up to this point. Massive dev teams are required to get content released at a reasonable pace. Large servers need to constantly run the game. Big marketing budgets need to attract other live service fans to these experiences, and so much more adds up to insane costs. I wanted to ask a developer about how bad live service can be to work with, and I have a friend that fits the bill pretty damn well. Me and him played together a ton during COVID on a Minecraft server. It had about 100 people on it, and it was a blast. It was just vanilla Minecraft, and we'd reset the server with each major update, but eventually it got kinda boring doing the same thing every time. When 1.18 released, my friend decided that, as a member of the server staff team, he and the rest of the team would create a constantly evolving world with custom items and dungeons to add more excitement to the world. He experienced the issues with live service development firsthand. Take a listen.
I'm Dispense Diamond. I've been doing some Minecraft data pack stuff for the Bidlantis SMP, which is run by the YouTuber Bidsel. At the time, he had over 100,000 subscribers. The server we were running was a Minecraft multiplayer SMP, just a survival multiplayer server. Different seasons had different things going on.
What was your role on the staff team specifically during Season 5?
I mostly dealt with just the back-end coding, using data packs and command blocks and whatever I needed to do to get the stuff we wanted to make done.
Would you say that the core idea behind it was sustainable for the staff team in terms of effort?
Well, no. I had a lot of difficulties coming up with actual ideas, making use of what Minecraft had available.
Was the feedback to the content that you did deliver mostly positive? If not, what was some of that feedback that you received?
I think players usually enjoyed the content that was released, but there was not really a lot of filler, so people would get through it way faster than we could ever hope to make it. People would be there for, just like a couple days at most, but it would take weeks to develop.
How much time would you say it took for you to deliver 1 hour of content to the server?
When it came to like the actual substantial dungeons stuff, it was 2 weeks for an hour.
What percentage of people that hopped on to this server do you think stayed the course and saw the breadth of the content that you provided?
I think the number of people that were actually there to see all the content, maybe around 20%.
Would you ever want to do something like this again? This being the server?
Personally, probably not, but...
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That's all I had for you question-wise, so thanks.
Thanks for having me on.
Live service can be hellish for devs, annoying for players, and so much more. But the biggest issue with live service aren't the constant needs to make new content without breaks, nor the struggles with over-delivery, nor anything else I've gone into here. The biggest issues are the drive for devs to include predatory, disgusting microtransactions, as well as attempting to drive as much FOMO, or fear of missing out, as possible. Like I said before, live service games are insanely expensive to run. They require so many resources from developers and publishers that studios try to milk them for all they're worth financially. It's why even paid games have battle passes now. Call of Duty is a $70 game with some of the most ludicrously expensive microtransactions I've ever seen. Like, look at this. Look, companies deserve to make money when they make great stuff. No one bats an eye when Nintendo makes bank from a high-quality exclusive. Same with Sony and Microsoft. But live service games have perfected exploiting the human psyche for financial gain. These games are played by many people below the age of 18. They often are young, lacking a concept of money or a concept of statistical odds, so they'll steal their parents' credit card and purchase a few loot boxes in their game of choice, hoping to get that hat or weapon skin or whatever they want so bad. Well, better luck next time, right? And these games try to guarantee that there will be a next time. Blizzard pulled loot boxes in Overwatch 2 after some governments started cracking down on games allowing minors to gamble, but Overwatch 1 made bank off of loot boxes, and Genshin Impact is still making bank off them now. Impressionable kids spend money on the chance to get some random skins because each time you get something that's a little bit rare, dopamine floods your brain. These kids have no concept of money. They don't understand that these loot boxes are rigged against them. The house always wins. Hell, this doesn't just affect kids. Loot boxes are inherently predatory, using the fact that we tend to overestimate our odds of winning chance games in order to bait money out of us, letting us win just enough to keep us paying. TF2 and CS2, both games that, if not live service, certainly have live service elements, are some of the worst offenders of utilizing loot boxes. It's just not okay to prey on people with these tactics. Look, microtransactions are a necessary beast in live service gaming. If you want to keep a game alive for years, you need revenue streams. Microtransactions provide those in spades, but the increased monetization of these games can make them feel downright money hungry. Modern Warfare 3's got a paid battle pass within the paid battle pass called Black Cell. There's ridiculous and predatory monetization throughout the gaming industry, especially in live service games, and there needs to be some regulation in order to protect consumers, especially kids. The last of the two issues with live service games is the amount of FOMO baked within the genre. Look, some moments in live service games can only be experienced once, and that's okay for certain things. Live events like discussed earlier are a prime example of this. Stuff like the Liberation campaign of Malevelon Creek in Helldivers 2, where players threw themselves at the planet for weeks before finally getting through. That stuff is awesome. It's what live service games do best. No, what I'm talking about is when a game is specifically designed to push you to only play it. Not because you're enjoying yourself, but because you might miss out on stuff if you don't play. Destiny 2 is potentially the worst offender in this. The game's first 4 expansions campaigns are unplayable, as well as every seasonal story. Vital stuff happened in those campaigns and stories, stuff that players need to understand the overarching story of the game, yet they're no longer in the game. I paid for that content, and the developers removed it because the game got too big to effectively develop. This entire saga has created an environment in the game where players may play certain weeks of content not because they're excited, but because they're worried about missing out on content they paid for that may be gone when they later come back. FOMO also comes in the form of loot in MMOs. Players want to grind for the best stuff so that they aren't weak or underpowered, even if there's a new best whatever every expansion. By making loot purposefully incredibly rare, developers can tip the scales, forcing players to stay logged on for hours past enjoyment in order to get the items they want. I know it may not sound that bad, but I've caught myself playing live service games not because I was enjoying myself, but because I wanted to experience stuff before it was gone far too many times. Games are meant to be fun. If we play them just to grind out the loot that ultimately doesn't mean anything, especially when we aren't enjoying ourselves, what's the point? Look, just because there are a ton of issues with live service games doesn't mean they can't be incredible experiences. I know I was more negative than usual today, but I truly believe Destiny wouldn't be half the game it is without the live service model. World of Warcraft wouldn't be the juggernaut it still is today. Helldivers 2 would have never had the highs of liberating a planet with your buddies. But not every game needs to be live service. They have a multitude of common pitfalls, and upper management loves to try to make games that would work great as single-release titles live service. Live service titles can be amazing, with potential for real special aspects that just can't be achieved in traditional gaming. I just hope that future releases understand what makes live service and traditional games so good, and releases under the best model for it. Thanks for watching.